All right, this week on the Artist of Motion podcast, we are featuring Grandmaster Carl Schalyo of the International Karate Connection Association. This is the first time I got to sit down with Grandmaster Schalyo and have some historical Kenpo discussions and hear some of the stories from where he's taught in the past and where he's at today. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Here we go with Grandmaster Schalyo.
All right, today on the Artist of Motion podcast. This gentleman started Kenpo in late 1963 at the legendary Crenshaw School under Chuck Sullivan and Ed Parker. He earned his first degree black belt, which was signed by both Mr. Parker and Mr. Sullivan in 1968, and he's been active training and teaching ever since. Today, he's a 10th degree black belt and successor in interest of the International Karate Connection Association. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Grandmaster Carl Schalyo. Welcome to the show today, sir. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Steve. Doing really well.
All right. Well, we are privileged to have you here. My first segment of every show is basically it's your opportunity to give us your curriculum vitae, your background. So I already gave them where you started. So how did you get started in 1963, and how's that taken you up till today?
Well, in 1963, I was in. My parents and I were all living in Los Angeles, California, and I wound up going to the same school that my father had gone to, which used to be in a bean field, but it turned around, and by the time I got there, it was surrounded by homes, and I had to walk to school every day. So in that walk, my dad and I talked about it, that he said, well, it might be good to learn how to, fight and or do something to defend yourself. So I said, hey, that's great, Dad. Now, what am I going to do? And he says, well, let's try and look and find something. So I saw a demonstration, and it was it was actually a karate demonstration, and I had no idea what style it was, but it looked like it was something that I would like to do. So I took that name home and started thumbing through what I don't think anybody understands today as a phone book. And,
I remember those.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. They're heavy pieces of paper right now. And they used to put everything went in the phone book because that was the way everybody advertised back then. And I found this one little thing that said karate. It didn't say anything else other than that. And it just had a number you called and an address. And it was way up on Crenshaw Boulevard from where we lived, because we lived over on Imperial and Western. And so it was a little drive. And so my dad took me up there because I didn't have a permit back then to drive. And we sat there and watched a couple of classes. And he asked me if that's what I wanted to do. And I said, yes, sir, that is what I would like to do. And so that's where it all got started. Well, later, back in those days, you could get a learner's permit when you were 15 and a half. So by the time I did get one, my dad had already let me drive up and back. And I signed up. And so we went through the basic classes with Ed and Chuck. And Chuck taught all the basics, like he did with everybody that went through that school. It was just absolutely incredible. But we learned our basics. Really learned them. And even to this day, I know Chuck says basics are the key, but he's absolutely right. Because we learned how to block, kick, punch, and that's what we did time after time, night after night, till everybody in that class got it right. And it was very, very interesting. The training was absolutely incredible because I'm sure everybody's heard the stories by now of all the old kinds of the old things everybody used to do back then. But the old Crenshaw School, as I remember, on one side was a dance studio, and then on the other side was a hair salon for ladies and stuff. And back then, in those days, they didn't have nice cases and stuff, but they put all their products along the wall. And it got to the point where we would bang into the walls in Crenshaw because it wasn't too wide, and there was no mats. It was just the little tile floor, and it had the rice or straw mat that was down. No, they weren't. No, this was before tatami. This was like the hard floor. This is where you've heard about the canvas getting stretched and watered down. Well, this was kind of this is what that was, because we all had our little Coke bottle and we get out there and water the thing down so we wouldn't slip on those mats. I mean, on the paint canvas that was down on the floor. But we usually did wind up slipping every now and then. And when we go back and forth, we'd have two lines, and then everybody would go back and forth. But along that, we'd wind up banging into the wall. And we'd hit that wall so hard sometimes you could hear stuff fall off of their shelves next door and break. That was back, when everything was made in, for the most part, in glasses and containers. And that was kind of interesting. I do remember one time they came over and asked Chuck not to bang into the walls, but that just helped us and inspired us to do it a little bit more each night. So that was kind of an interesting proposition. But we finally cooled that off and just went to training. But the training was really, really good. And that was back with Steve Mohammed, and back then with Chuck Boyd and Stacy IKCA, and all of us came up, and Crazy George and Vic, and we all came up through that school, and it was just absolutely incredible. But we did learn, because what we did mainly was we learned to fight, freestyle. We learned a lot of techniques that were available to us then, and we just got to the point where you would actually sometimes get out there and you go a little rough, but you knew if you tagged somebody, that sooner or later somebody come back and they'd tag you, not maliciously, but you knew it was coming. And so yeah, it was a give and take, and we all understood that. There wasn't any problem with anybody with that. So it was really great training, and we spent a lot of time, and even to this day, I'm glad we did, because occasionally, the older you get, the more you hope you don't fall, but you do occasionally, even on the mats now, once in a while, but is learning how to fall and how to fight on the ground and get up from where you are on that ground. And we did that so much that even to this day, I haven't forgot how to do that. It's a little harder on the body nowadays, but other than that, it has saved me a couple of times from some serious, I'm sure would have been injuries if I had not learned that back then. So, and it was just great. And then we finally got the Tommy mats, and those were like, for us, it was like walking on air after being on the canvas floor. So we kind of marveled at that, and so a lot of things happened in that Crenshaw school where we would get I know you've all heard the stories again about pulling the furniture out, setting it up, and Chuck would designate an attacker or two, and you'd go at it, and we had stuff like water and cups, and we get tossed over in the chairs. You'd be seeing guys jump over the coffee table, had some guy sitting on the couch, things like that. It was really kind of a unique training environment. Also back in the, and then there was nights occasionally when you would have somewhat of a free-for-all and turn the lights out and had everybody, and you could hear everybody going, oh, while you're fighting out there, and all of a sudden the lights would flip on, and somebody, would be the last one standing, and that was kind of a treat. So, but the thing I noticed that was good about that is nobody minded being tagged once in a while, and the closeness and the way you did techniques back then, your control was good, and you're actually, I think, closer control than today. That's for sure. So it made a big difference in the way we did train, and it's kind of stuck with all of us old guys for forever. So after the Chuck closed the school, we went down to what I call the Inglewood School, but it was one that was on La Brea. It was and was down there, and I guess I was in somewhere in late '68, early '70 till '72, and there we had the tatami mats down, and it was a little bit bigger place, which made it kind of nice. And everybody still trained down there, and we had a great time. And then after that, I moved on to Santa Monica when he closed the La Brea place in '72, right around then, and taught for a little bit until I graduated out of college. And so that was also fun down there at Santa Monica, especially. That was different for us because this is when Mr. Parker has started getting the short version of I call it the BK1ZY type stuff, where we were teaching half-hour private lessons, and but the basics and everything was all coded like that, which gave us a little bit of fits because we had to slow down because we didn't know what it was, because they didn't have that in the old days. So that made it kind of an interesting challenge for all of us, but we survived that and went through it. And then everybody kind of moved on after that, and I moved on, and then places that I had gone where my job took me, I've always been able to teach people, and one or two or five or six, or down in Arizona where I was there for a while. I had a school with it's called Rolling Dragon, Chinese Kenpo, and those guys are still together, half of them, even today. So it's been, and then now I'm out here in Texas, and I teach out of my garage. I have a dojo. It's all set up, and I teach whoever wants to learn. And that's how I keep going now with what we're doing, as well as traveling with Chuck on his quest and what he wants to do with travel and seminars. And so that's what all the old guys are kind of doing with him now. So that's my story for that.
Right on. So you had actually taught for several different schools back in the early days, right? That was, if I got on my listing correctly, that was Crenshaw, Inglewood, and not Santa Monica, but there was another one, right?
No, it was Crenshaw, Inglewood, and Santa Monica.
Oh, it was Santa Monica.
And
okay.
then, yeah.
So, but then that spanned from the late '60s into the '70s, and that's when there was a whole lot of different curriculum enhancements going on in the Parker lineage, and there had a whole lot of different theories and approaches that came out all at the same time. So that was like a boom time back in the days. What do you?
Yeah, it was because when we started, there were not very many of them had names. We get out there on the mat and they'd say, "Oh, well, let's do this one. You all know this one." And we would look at each other, and then whoever was teaching the class, we'd start doing it. We go, "Oh yeah, we know that one." Well, it was just the way that things were going back then. And then it got structured, and Sparker added more and more.
So when you were teaching prior to being really super active with the IKCA, which lineage or which set of material were you teaching?
I was teaching what I learned at IKCA because the techniques suited me. I mean, because I like to move with those techniques, and the way the IKCA has gone now, those techniques are still the ones I like to move with. So basically, when and it's gone to a lot less even than what we had back in the day too. So those were you pick what you want to do with the techniques. You need to learn all the basics and learn them really well. Learn the techniques. What I have found over the years is those techniques are just tools for you to use. if you ever need to use them, you actually put those tools, you take those tools with you in your tool bag, you set it down. When something starts, you may start with a technique, but you won't finish the technique that you learned typically. And you'll pull a tool to fit that situation, the timing, and everything, how your body will react and what's happening in a confrontation. So those tools are the guide. I've had instances where somebody would say, "Well, what did you do?" And I'd look at them and say, "I really don't know." Because you just pulled that tool and used it, put it away, and went to the next one. So that's what the techniques and repetition teaches you. It teaches you spontaneity to act in a certain situation so that you can defend yourself.
Okay, so having been through, 2 or 3 different versions of the Parker curriculum then, right? And then the IKCA on top of that. So what do you think has been the advantages / disadvantages of having to learn each of those different, disparate curriculum sets?
From a curriculum sense, I think what we have is that it is still Kenpo. And all of the moves are still the moves. Every principle, concept, and move that I knew in the old days is here in the IKCA. I mean, it is all here. So I haven't found anything that wasn't. So, as far as learning them, of course, it's a learning process to go back through and how the IKCA was put together and how the techniques are structured and the names are a little bit different, but basically, it all fit together really well. So the learning curve for coming across is not bad, and it was not bad at all. It did take some time, though, to get them stuck in your head, but most of the time you sit there and say, "I know that move. Oh yeah, I've got that move. Oh, that came, from here and there." So it blended really, really well. So we haven't lost any of the Parker moves, and from the old days, or from the IKCA. It's all right there, and being refined down into that 55 techniques did make it a lot easier to remember everything, also to practice it. And because I've got books, and I'm sure everybody does, in the infamous Red Book, go back and try and go through that and read all of that if you've forgotten a technique. And it becomes a challenge sometimes. But for the most part now, I'm strictly IKCA, and I use these techniques, and I'm very, very comfortable with them. I think anybody that would like to will find that they can be comfortable with them. So, that is it wasn't a problem. It was just you had to relearn what was here as far as the order and what the techniques are.
I think that's fair. So I know your son has done extensive training in some other martial arts as well. So my question was on that one. How much exposure to other arts have you found throughout your journey?
Not much. For me personally, because I moved around a lot, and what I did was I taught what I know. And occasionally I would get together with some guys. It's one guy was out, I was teaching him, and he became, he was working with me with the Kenpo, but when I moved, he was sitting in this one particular town, and actually he and his wife became black belts in Taekwondo back in the day. So that was interesting and good. So, you have to say, well, it did help some, but what we're doing right now with my son is he is a black belt in Aikido, and what we've done is actually introduced, at least for us here, is introduce some of the joint locks. If somebody ever decides to leave their hand hanging out in the breeze, or you haven't gotten them with the first punch, because obviously you need to stun them, and then perhaps you could be able to lock them up. But I don't recommend that. I recommend the Kenpo first, then what you have later. So but it's nice. It works well because there are some basic some of the grabs and some of the things that we do with the Kenpo is pretty. I would look at it like basic type of keto moves, but not concentrated like you would actually when you actually are learning the Aikido. And I stick with just the stuff that I can do standing up with the joint locks. So, and it works if you can get a hold of somebody.
Yeah, so. I'm going to neglect to mention who said it. But I was told by somebody that, especially back in the day, the rule was you don't let Carl get a hold of you ever.
Yeah. Well,
now, why would somebody want to say that? I'm curious.
Well, because I like doing takedowns, and once I got you with that, I would do a takedown. Once I got up close to you, that's where I went. So I wanted you on the ground. So, and yeah, the only guy. I don't see. But I mean, we had a good time doing that. I do remember a time when I did actually get a hold of Chuck once.
Oh, you got to tell us a story.
Once I got a hold of him.
That seems to be everybody's story too. I got him one time.
Yeah. No, we were. Oh gosh, I forget which school. I think we were over in Crenshaw, but yeah, he got close enough to me, and I was going backwards, and I kind of got tripped up, but he was close enough where I grabbed him, and I actually, as I rolled on my back, I flipped him over me, and he landed upside down on the wall and slid down. And back then we were all agile. We'd get up real quick, and we got back up, because I watched him, and it was almost like slow motion. And when he slid down the wall, and we got up, we got back into our stances, and we're sitting there, and he looked at me, and he just started pointing that finger at me. And anybody that knows Chuck knows how he points that finger. And he looked at me, and he said, "Schalyo, that is the last time you'll ever touch me." I went, "Oh shit!" And it was, because then he proceeded to just pick me apart. Because Chuck back in the day was so fast and so accurate, it was absolutely unbelievable. So, and even to this day, we've remained true friends. He's almost, he's just unbelievable. And that's been over 53 years now. So, same thing with Stacy and Takasha and Chuck Boyd. It's amazing the friendship that you build out of the art. So
totally, my best friends in the world are the ones that I met in martial arts, with the exception of the two people that I grew up with. They were from my old neighborhood. It's a different ballgame, but everybody else who's really, really close to me right now is all martial arts buddies. Just cool stuff.
Oh yeah, but it was it was just so much fun learning. But we worked hard. We worked seriously hard.
So what other stories do you have that you can tell us about some of those old days in training?
Oh, actually, I already mentioned some of the stuff. In Crenshaw. Well, occasionally you get out there against. If you let your elbow drift, I think people wouldn't like you doing this today. But if you let your elbow drift out when you were throwing a punch, going into the forward bow, and not dragging the elbow along your rib cage as it came out, and keeping a good nice straight line with that punch. Chuck would get us up against a brick wall, and he'd say, "Here, stand about 6 inches away from it, and just throw those punches as hard as you can." And we'd do that, and you learn to keep it in tight, because if you didn't, you're scratching the heck out of your arm while sliding on that brick when it comes out on that wall. So we used to do that kind of stuff. We used to stand to the point where we would block and punch, and I would go home bruised from my wrist to my elbows, and from my shin, and from my knees to my ankles, with some serious bruises on them. Because when we lined up and we started throwing punches, it was just simple step-through stuff. But everybody was coming hard. They were coming fast, and they were aiming at your nose. It wasn't any of this, I'll just move off to the side of your head. It was serious, and everybody had that aim point, and it was your nose. And if you didn't block it or you missed the block, you got hit. Every now and then you hear a guy go, "Oh," and you knew what happened. You knew they missed the block, didn't throw it hard enough. And, it happened a lot with Crazy George, so he was fun to play with like that. He and I, kind of like to beat up each other. So that was kind of fun. Same thing with the kicks. We were just doing downward blocks, but you would be close enough to when you did kick, you'd kick them in the groin if they did not block it. So you had to pay attention. You couldn't let your mind drift while they were running, like the drill was being ran like that. And then there was the old stuff where, everybody's gi would get tore off. You take somebody down and they grab your gi and they rip it off just below where your belt was tied on some of the old cheapy gis. And and we all wore white gis, old white teccados. So that was a while ago. I still got mine, actually. So it's a little yellow these days, but I'm still hanging in the closet.
Does it still have both sleeves on it?
Yeah, but it doesn't have a bottom. And the shoulder came apart, where people would, or where the guys they grab you when they were doing a takedown, and you'd really grab. And it wasn't one of these, I'm just going to touch you, you go with it. You had to actually move the person and take them down. Otherwise, they'd stand there and look at you like, what are you doing? So you got the idea, you got the point really quick to do the techniques correctly. And actually do them like it meant something.
Like you're actually going to use them?
Oh, yeah, because,
Shocking.
and I know. I still go under the adage, you're going to train like you fight. In the end, that is what's going to happen. So I think everybody that trains really hard needs to, continue that and not let their students get away without doing that. And it's important, I think, to emphasize that.
You mean it matters?
So, yeah, slightly.
You can't just air Kenpo your way through everything?
Nope. I call it, I call it soft Kenpo when they do that. And because it just looks soft to me.
So what does a typical training session look like that you're running today versus how you used to teach it back in the 60s or 70s?
Well, depends on who it's with. If you're training, some people, they're not gonna survive. I run it hard though. I mean, I throw punches at the kids, and some of these guys are like 17, 18, and I'll throw punches at them to where I tell them, I says, I want you to block hard. I want you to spasm my arm, when I'm doing that. But I'm all padded up these days because I bruise like crazy. So, but I get them to actually get to where they can block that kind of punch. And the same thing when they freestyle. I tell them, I says, hey, if you're don't just stop because somebody tags you once, because that's not the way it's going to happen. You have to learn to keep going. And so it's a little bit rough, but when I look back on it, except for I got probably back up. The guys down in Arizona were like that. They were tough, but these guys were ATF, Border Patrol, EMT guys, and they were pretty tough characters. So, and that's what they wanted. They wanted it hard, and I said, okay. So we did that, and so you'll find that even those guys that are still down there training are hard. They are hard because they hit hard, they block hard. That's the way I train them. But these days when we're doing that, I do pad up at least on the arms. Back then we didn't have any pads. We didn't have, well, we had a cup, but that was about it. Those shoes, so it was a different era. And sometimes, you walk away from that and you go, hey, that was great, and we did it. But maybe you sit there and look at it 50 plus years now, and like Chuck mentioned, some things don't work the way they used to, just because of that. So, but that being what it is, to me, it was worth it.
I mean, if you don't put the time in to get your basics right, and that means you have the ability to actually block something. I mean, most of those lovely laid out plans we call technique go out the window as soon as you miss that first block. So, yeah, I think it's worth it.
Oh yeah. You don't want to miss that first one, that's for sure. But it's like that old saying is timing is everything. I don't see a lot of people these days actually doing. All the fancy names and all that stuff are really really good, but I'm just going to call it settling, because being able to settle your body weight and add power to what you're doing through your form and keeping your style and your basics and your moves. Take that extra little step drag in with a shot, and move your mass with you, and it does make everything a lot different. So, and you remember, you always want to get to your targets. So that's what you practice for. And when people, and it's good because some people won't stand there like the classical, like we do, just to offer yourself so somebody can work a technique. You get that occasional person or student that'll do something, and he'll get into a funny way and a funny position, and you have to really adjust. And that's what I say. That's where you start using your toolkit now. So, and but each time, of course, the object is to put that guy on the ground, your opponent, if there ever is one. So
at what point in somebody's training do you start teaching them the takedowns?
Well, they usually get it within what I do first is I get them down. I'll get them right around somewhere in purple belt, and we'll start just by learning gently how to fall. And once they get that down, so they can slap their hand out, don't land on their elbows and things like that, then I will start saying, okay, now we'll start doing some things that will take you down, and you show them some simple stuff, and have them work on that. And you start easy, and then you get to the point where when they take each other down, they go down harder. Make sure that they fall right, and because that's important. Safety is important, and it's to get them so they fall right every time, because as well as I do that occasionally you just slip and you're going to go down. Well, it's nice to be able to know what to do while you're going down, so you don't land on that elbow or, break your wrist type thing, when you're falling. Because most people will put their hand down when you start falling. Mm-hmm. So, but you just have to train it. You have to train to do that. But that part of it, once you get that, I don't think it's going to leave you. You will remember, especially when you're falling on something hard like the cement, or even on the mats these days. So.
Yeah, I haven't had cause to fall outside of a dojo since I don't know. I was probably 18 or 19 the last time I fell someplace other than a dojo. But I did trip over a curb one time when I was carrying packages out, and I apparently did a complete forward roll, didn't lose the packages, stood back up, put my packages back on my motorcycle, put my helmet on, and rode home. When I got home, I had 2 missed calls from my buddy, who apparently was in the parking lot, saw the whole thing, and was trying to call me to ask what the heck just happened.
Right.
Like, I have no idea. So.
Yeah, that triggered my memory. I had something like that on a raining curve, I slipped one time, and I went down and got back up. I would train, and the guy looked at me that was standing next to me. He says, "Where'd you go?" I think I fell. He says, "Well, I said, "Well," but it saved me, and I just had to brush myself off a little. So, but it's worth it. It's worth learning how to fall, and I think there's so much stuff out there now. Doing a ground game, I think, is important to where at least you know what it is, in case and more so that so you can defend against it. Because what would you really do? Most people, when somebody grabs you, people have a tendency to grab them back for whatever reason.
Isn't that weird?
I think everybody. Yeah, I think everybody does that. Though, you grab me with two hands, I'm going to grab you with two hands. Why? I don't know.
Yeah, those are called gifts.
They're called what?
Gifts. I know where your weapons are at now. You just gave me a gift.
But, so I really think you need to practice a little bit of that so you know what you're doing. Because I was talking to one of our guys that has done a lot of groundwork, and he just says, "Well, you old guys, you probably just hit people, and on the way down." And I went, "Yeah, probably, yeah, because that's the only thing we know." And so, but we are going to hit you. So, because I won't grapple with anybody. I think a lot of old guys don't want to grapple. So again, we go back and I follow on the simple method. And I know it's not, a lot of people don't like to use it, but it's like Chuck says, if they can't see you, they can't hit you. And that started years ago. I remember him saying that. So, and it's even true to this day. So, and you gotta remember what your targets are and what you want to do to somebody. So, and you have to be careful what you're going to do. You don't want to overdo it either.
That's actually a really important concept. So, how do you have that kind of discussion on, where do you draw the line and all that fun stuff?
Well, what I do is I look at it, and when you start moving, because Kenpo moves awfully quick, and if you're doing it right, and you're timing with those shots, you take what I would call a timing break, or when you're actually checking, you can actually take a damage assessment there and just observe what you're doing when you're getting ready to set for the next blow. And if the guy, if they're down, let them go. But then you never know, what's enough. But you do want to, you take that. I call it an assessment, a damage assessment. And so I know that should I continue or not, and that's where you have to make a personal decision. There's nothing in the guidebook that says this is when you stop.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody is different. It's the impact force to knock somebody down 10 pounds for one guy, but it may be 100 pounds for the next guy. So you don't know what that is. So you have to be the judge after starting with the second strike. Because I don't know how hard it is you don't know how much pressure you need to use, how much force. You start with the maximum and go, you can back off of that. Because you want to stop anything that's threatening your life. If you have the chance to do it with, with just the weapons that you have available to you with Kenpo or any martial art for that matter.
I think that's fair. You have to assume, since somebody has already, made the overt attack on you in the first place, that they need to be responded to with your best shot first, and then evaluate immediately, right?
That's right.
It seems like a fair equation. So, how much? So let's talk about like a traditional class that you're teaching in, just as your everyday students type thing. How do you break up that class? Like, what do you do first? What do you do second? What do you do third? How long does that class run? That type thing.
Well, usually it depends. The students are starting that you're teaching basics to, I like to keep them in, basics, in a basic class where their attention is just on the basics, not on a technique that's being taught that'll just confuse them. So once they get the base of blocks, kicks, punches, step through, crossover, and the basic kicks, that's when I'll move them up to start actually teaching the techniques. But typically, I keep those separate because you've got so many. I honestly believe that, and I'm kind of like Chuck in that matter. I'd rather teach my students the basics to start with, because then they know what it's going to be, and I don't have to go back and all of a sudden find out that, if you're not doing the basics right, you're never going to be able to do the techniques correct. So, that makes a big difference. And typically, once you fold the beginners, you into the intermediate, you're going to have another class. So typically that class for the basics, I start with no more than an hour for the basics. The intermediates, we can go like an hour and a half. And then any of the advanced, anybody that's advanced, you can run 2 hours. So, and it depends on the mix in the class, whether you separate the classes out or pretty soon when they all come up to speed, you just combine everybody. And the same thing goes like for freestyling. I like to start them freestyling a little bit early, maybe just with 1 or 2 moves, so they get used to moving with the basics that they now have. And it's pretty well controlled with that, to where it's you're looking for targets, and so you start doing that, and then you slowly start picking it up. And finally, when you get to where you've got your advanced students, you say, okay, 5, 6, 7, 8 blows. Don't just do 1 or 2 and 3 and stop, because that's what everybody expects. That when you think about it, you go 1, 2, 3 and everybody stops, or 1, 2, 3, 4, everybody stops. I said, no, you got to get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 going, and you must be, moving. You can't just go 3 or 4 and stop. So that gets everybody used to actually moving. So, and basically that's what more than 2 hours is waste, I think, because you run out of gas.
Yeah. So of that 2 hours, though, how long do you spend on basics? How long do you spend on, techniques? How long do you spend on freestyle, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, freestyle is not every night or every day or every time everybody shows up, but basics, always start with the basics. And basically what we do is we'll warm up with probably, I don't do any of the jumping jacks and all that junk because it's a waste of their time. I'd rather have them learning. So I'll spend, let's say with an intermediate class, maybe 10, 15 minutes just on basics, but it's purely as a warm-up. And what do I use? Well, I'll use the orange belt. Well, I mean the yellow belt. The orange belt test for the warm-up, but it's all movement. It's all movement. It's not. There's no anything. There's nothing else in there. And you can actually, after you get used to it, it becomes a pretty good warm-up session. And then nobody even knows that they're actually doing that repetitively all the time, because you just warm it up. And then I'll spend probably, it depends. Sometimes a technique sometimes can take quite a while to do. And if I'm just teaching a technique, it might take the rest of that night, and maybe some other nights more time, depending on how well they learn it, or how well they adapt to it. So, and then freestyle for the advanced guys will go 3 minutes. It's kind of interesting to watch, because out here we die in the heat really quick. So, but A 3-minute round's like spending 20 minutes out there freestyling. I kid you not. It is a little bit humid out here too. So, and I'm sure everybody that lives in humid country knows just exactly what I'm talking about. Because the garage is not air conditioned.
Actually, that made me think though. So back in the days in the Crenshaw School and all that kind of stuff, were those air conditioned, or were those just you guys just sweat like crazy?
They hadn't invented air conditioning then.
That's what I thought. So you kind of like back to the old school days for you there too, then, right?
Oh yeah, but you got to remember, Southern California back then, weather was gorgeous. So, it really wasn't all that bad. But I mean, we used to, all the places I've ever been, and that included Santa Monica, anything that was glass was sweaty by the time it was over with. Crenshaw you could see outside in the street. I mean, we would go outside and have to take a break every now and then just to get a breath of fresh air. So, but Santa Monica was the same way, and La Brea was the same. So, those were hard workouts. They were not easy. But that's back when we didn't even walk around with a lot of fancy water bottles either. You get out there and just drip. You'd be a puddle of sweat at your feet, and that was it.
So you don't allow puddles of sweat in the garage?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I have puzzle mats I put down, so yeah, they can sweat on those.
There you go.
So. Oh yeah, no, it's go ahead. And the more people you get, the more heat you generate too. So.
Yep. So it's nice in the winter and it bakes in the summer.
That's right. Well, I don't know about winter. I've had a few days. We've had a few days that we'd sit there and go, guys, it's time to leave. It's cold. So, but overall, it's not bad. But I like the concept though, going back to the original question of having a basic class, an intermediate class, and then an advanced class. It helps. But then again, when you move up, you are really that basic guy moving into an intermediate class. You will find, the guys that have been in the intermediate are really the guys you want to train with, because you always want to train with somebody that's better than you are. Mm-hmm. It just makes you sharper. That's what it does. So, that does really help.
But literally, it's the only way to get better. You have to work with somebody who's better than you.
Right, and you need to work with somebody different sizes people, and it makes a difference. Because I remember we used to freestyle and had guys there was some tall, lanky folks. And, you had to learn how to fight with people like that. So, and they were doing the same with you. They were learning how to fight, short people and fat people and tall people. Everybody had to learn that mix, and that's what made it, made you better rounded. Because it does make a difference. So, what do you do with guys with really long legs? Well, you try and get on the inside. So keep that foot from coming up. You don't want to get kicked with it.
Yeah, that's true. I got a buddy who's 6'5", and I tell him I'm not getting kicked by those tree trunks anymore. That's not happening. I'm going to stay inside. You're going to imagine you're fighting me in a phone booth.
Yeah, can you imagine getting up to somebody like that's 6'7", like Greg is?
Yeah, I will definitely fight him inside a phone booth, because he's going to have to duck to get in there in the first place. So that's another advantage.
Yeah, but now you got to find a phone booth.
Good point. So, talking about freestyling, there's a lot of times you get students who are just really scared to freestyle. So what do you think, what's your advice for those students when they start moving around and you can just tell that they're just scared to death of freestyle?
I used to have, one of the guys I got, one of the kids, he would run out of the garage. You move at him and, he'd run. I says, man, you're doing really good. I says, you avoided that. That is great. But sooner, you start just one at a time, one move at a time. You get them to just start working back and forth. And you get them to run drills back and forth. So they get used to having somebody in front of them and somebody that'll move. But you do that as a program set of drills, not just free drills where they can do anything they want, which actually makes them get more comfortable, I think, in bringing them into that freestyle arena. Because I don't do anything with point scoring at all. I do. It's all continuous. So, but I think they need to be brought along into it, slowly, surely, and you help them along the way, and they get more comfortable with it. And now that kid that ran out of the garage doesn't run no more. He stands right there and will bang it out.
Nice. So what do you do specifically for them to get over that fear? Is that something where you'll take it on and you'll spar with them yourself, or is that, do you have like a senior student where you say, okay, you're playing defense, I want him to learn how to move around and find a target type thing, or what?
Yeah, I'll do that with them. I'll get out there and I'll be the defense and let them move. And just two things. I mean, it keeps the old guys sharp, for blocking, and lets the young guys, feel empowered to and get comfortable moving. So, and then sometimes I will pit them together, and I'll get out there and more advanced students will say, okay, well, you're strictly defending yourself, and you cannot throw anything back. And I'll let the other students say, okay, tell them, go ahead, see if you can score on the guy, and start moving. And, I said, start moving in sets of 3, and then we'll bump it up to 4s, 5s, 6s, like I said earlier, just so we can get the flow going. Because, as soon as what happens a lot of times, and it's happened over the years, is when you're freestyling, but I think a lot of guys, you forget when you're in a confined area, you'll find that sometimes people will turn their backs on you. And that's when if you're freestyling with them, that's when you need to back off, because they've had it. Their brain just shut them down and said, hey, I can't, I got to protect myself. And they'll turn away from you. And so you use that. And when you start doing that, and then they also see that, well, look, I can do this. You say, They start learning to say, they get more confidence. And I know that I've been told, that people say, hey, look, this is the greatest thing that you can do is with the kids, is teach them that confidence factor. That they know, along with the responsibility that goes with what they're learning. And, you need to tell the kids that you have to be really careful with what you do. So, and you train them. And I'll ask parents, what are they doing? How they do in school? All that kind of stuff. And I'll ask the kids, how was your day at school or your week? Have you had any problems? And I expect, they give me honest answers. So, but that's the way I run things.
So what's the drill that you just have to watch and enjoy people doing?
Oh, I've always, I guess, the drills, techniques, running the line, whether it be escape techniques or punching techniques. I love it. And that's what I like to watch people do. Because then you can see a sense of confidence building in them. And I think that probably makes me happier than anything.
I could hear that tone in your voice change. Okay, so do you have any of those students lately that you just got to see that light bulb moment go on? Or they're struggling with it, and you put them in the line, and all of a sudden, boom, they got it?
Once in a while. I mean, it happens, and yeah, I kind of like. You can see it, you know. And the other thing is I think it's important that instructors need to go out and they need to ask their students sometimes, like, do you feel you're ready, you know, for this or that, and get an honest answer from them. That's what I've always thought, because it's like, you know, it's been said that, you know, the hardest guy to fight is a Kenpo brown belt, because he's trying to get there. But you know, when you're coming up, and Steve, you know too, is even when you're a brown belt, you will know when you're ready for black yourself.
Well, you know when you think you're ready, at least.
Well, yeah, and you know, usually you are. So, you know, so anyway. I mean, that's what I get the biggest joy out of, is actually watching them, you know, and saying, okay, and you know, like you said, that you got it. I can see that. Or when, you know, especially when you're doing techniques, or when they're doing techniques with me, you know, you can, because I do my technique stuff a little bit different, and you know, I want them to actually do those leg checks and not just say, oh yeah, my knee is there. I want to feel it.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't feel it, you didn't do it. And then I know you're not close enough to me anywhere. So, you know, you get there, and, you know, it's like, say running, take a technique like by hitting the dragon. You can't see it if it's getting worked on you, but you can certainly feel it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll just feel those little nudges, the grabs, and you know, the checks and the chop and all that. You'll actually feel it, and you'll know. And then you feel the rhythm. Once you start feeling that rhythm, perk up, you know that if you can't stand up and watch it, you know they're getting it. So, and then it's time to get your camera out on them and say, okay, let's look at this now.
Nice.
And have some fun.
So how often do you pull out the camera?
Oh, every now and then I'll pull out the phone and record them and say, hey, look at this. You know, especially just every now and then I'll do that. I said, hey, you need to see this. And so we'll go ahead and do that, you know, and it works out pretty good.
You get the students that, I told you to do this. I am doing that. If I'm still telling you need to do it, you're not doing it. But I am. Okay, let's video this.
That's right.
I guess I wasn't.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And it even goes for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you think you're doing it's perfect. You're erect. You're doing the technique is looking good. You're checking the right way. And all of a sudden you find when you slow it down, your hands turn the wrong way. You know, your head's off, looking somewhere else. You know, just little things like that. And it's amazing. The camera tells all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it adds really, 10 pounds too, you know.
Oh yeah, but I mean it gives yeah, something I can't afford. But you know, it gives you a sense though to where you can look at it, and you know, if you can self-evaluate, you can sit there and say, okay, I see what I need to do. Whether it's going to improve your looks on the camera, I don't know, but at least you know you become aware of it, and you know, you start correcting. So you know, so a lot of times, like when you're using yourself as a rebound board when you're doing techniques to help speed things up a little bit, instead of having a flat hand hit yourself, you know, you turn it over and do the inverted shorthand as the check, not just flat. And that I find a lot, because even though you say it a lot and you say, well, I'm doing it this way, you look at it all of a sudden, you go, whoops, I flat-handed myself, you know, and because you're moving, but you need to practice it then and get that corrected. Because I've seen that on myself too. You know, it just happens. So But
Good times.
it just makes it, yeah, it does make it a great tool.
Okay, so my guest this week on the Artists of Motion podcast has been Grandmaster Carl Schalyo of the International Karate Connection Association. Mr. Schalyo, I am privileged and blessed that and I'm thankful that you took the time out of your day to be with us today. Our last part of our podcast, we usually throw right to, if you'd like to send out a message, but in your particular case, because you were there for so much of that early Kenpo history, I like stories. Is there any story you can share from us from those early days, or maybe something from more recent memory that made you, get a good giggle out of?
Well, I guess it what I found is story-wise, I think you hear the same stories from the same old guys all the time. So I'll tell you what, if you hear them more than once, they're probably true. So just take that for what it is. And, it was a great time, I think, in my life. And the people that I've been associated with, it's like you have friends throughout your life, but it seems like the people that are in martial arts are incredible and that they are your friends, for the most part, for life. And through the IKCA, it's truly been a blessing in disguise for me because it has turned out to be actually a real brotherhood where everybody that's involved, male or female, is like we walk into something. When you meet them for the first time, it's like you've known them forever. And it's just an absolutely incredible organization. So with that is pretty much my story.
Okay, fair enough. So we are now at, as of this podcast, 24 different countries around the world that are hearing our show, which is just mind-boggling to me, but it's been an absolutely fun ride getting here. So with that said, what message would you like to send out to our listening audience?
Well, I would say that to actually get out there, practice, have the basics correct, because you'll be able to stem off any direction you want to go. But if you have the right basics and train with the basics, and you train the way you will train the way you fight. So good luck, God bless, and train.
Well said. So getting a hold of Mr. Schalyo, if you'd like to, it's cschalyo@karateconnection.com is the easiest way to get a hold of him. That's SCHALYO. Did I miss anything there, sir?
No, Steve, you didn't. And hey, thanks for the interview. Appreciate it.
I had a blast. I'm looking forward to getting to actually see you in person here at some point.
Oh, we'll do that.
This will be fun. So, again, thank you for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and hoping anybody who's in class tonight gets a good workout.
Okay. Well, thank you, sir.
All righty. Have a good one.
Okay.
Bye.
That was a fun little chat there with Grandmaster Schalyo. It's the first time I got a chance to actually really sit down and pick his brain on a bunch of different subjects, so that was pretty cool. Not exactly sure who's going to be on our show next week yet. We have a couple of them sitting in the pipeline waiting to be filtered and approved and whatnot, so we'll see which one comes down the pipe, and we'll talk about it next week. If you guys will like what you're hearing, make sure you give us a review and give us some comments over there on iTunes or Google Play or over on Podbean itself. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the Artist of Motion podcast. I'm Steve Zalazowski.